Welcome to Fair Game. I'm Kristine Leahy. My guest today blazed her own trail, becoming a record-setting pro volleyball star, model, best-selling author, fitness guru, and an inspiration for female empowerment. Gabby Reece is here. Thanks, Gabby, for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I love sneakers and shoes, and you became Nike's first female athlete to design a shoe for the brand, which is such a big deal. At the time that happened, when they tapped you, were you like, oh my gosh, this is happening to me? What were your thoughts?
No, I was thinking that it was really good timing for me, that I came along in a generation where that was actually an opportunity. And I think what sort of flipped my switch a little more was they gave me the designer Tinker Hatfield, who did all the Jordans.
Yeah.
And so I think I was almost more surprised about that, because you sort of thought, oh, well, he knows what he's doing. But like anything, sort of when you're younger, you don't really maybe realize it, which I think is better.
Well, the shoe industry has gotten so interesting, I think, especially recently, like Adidas, when they got rid of their female ref for a certain situation. Or there was a little girl who wrote to Steph Curry about him not making his shoes available in female sizes.
Yes.
So when you look back at you, I feel like you were kind of the trailblazer for this thing of involving women in the shoe industry.
Yeah, and we did the first black shoe at Nike for women. You know, when Tinker asked me, what do you want? And I said, well, one of the things I want is this and that, and colors and black. And I have a large foot, it's a size 12. And so I said, and also I'd like to look at my foot and make it look smaller.
Yeah.
And Nike's like, we don't make black shoes for women. And so we did.
That's
and it did
awesome.
very well.
So a big reason why you were known is because of volleyball.
Sure.
And at the time, volleyball wasn't a huge sport, and women in volleyball wasn't a big thing either, and it was going on in the 90s. So for you, what was it like at that time trying to be a premier athlete in a sport that wasn't so big?
It was like a hustle. You know, I say that I always kept my eyes open as far as volleyball was always my first love, and being on a team and working really hard, even though there's things about it that are difficult. I always felt like I knew myself the best in that environment, but I also had my mind and my eyes on other careers I could be doing simultaneously, because I was well aware of how small the platform was. So it was a weird thing. We used to say 90% of my time went to training and playing, and 90% of my income, the lion's share of my income, came from outside things.
You did get a lot of other opportunities when you were playing volleyball, and there were critics that said that these were only coming because of the way you looked, which, by the way, I find insane, because of course you're going to be a model because you're pretty. Like, that's just what happens. But what would you say to those critics who would say that about you?
You know, listen, when I was younger, I really was so desperate to be taken seriously, because I sort of coveted or was trying to respect the position. I got the fact that I could be an athlete, and I thought it was important to be taken seriously. But I also understood, and this is very calculated, and I never shied away from saying this, that I sort of said, okay, if this is another thing that can create opportunity for me, if it's your physical appearance, which, by the way, you don't really have anything to do with, that I would play that card, if you will.
Of course.
And hopefully I would do it in a way, though, that was still respectful. But yeah, I was definitely going to play that card.
The more I think about this too, though, you look at men who have their shoe deals and their commercials and their movies. They're not criticized because of the way that they look, or they're not told you're not focusing enough on your actual career. But with a woman, the fact that you had to deal with that seems unfair.
But those are the metrics. You know, even to this day, you could take the best female athlete in the world, or the best in her sport, let's say, and we still really want to understand her story. And because women are pleasing to look at, they just are, that's sort of just something that people are drawn to about women. And I think with men, what we want to know is, like, what are his numbers and his statistics, and is he a good leader, and is he a warrior? And so when you're talking about sport, which is inherently either male or a male side of us females, you just have to understand, what it is. We're not talking about cooking and baking. We're talking about competing and being aggressive and all these things. So I just understood we were telling a different story, and so therefore we were going to be measured by different rules. And rather than fighting it, I thought, okay, I better have a good relationship with it, so at least I have a chance to express the message I want to be in charge of, and not spend a lot of time being like, well, it's not fair.
Yeah.
Because those are obstacles.
Sure.
If I talk about, like, it's not fair and I'm held back, then I'm held back. But if I go, hey, I'm trying to get there, then what does that look like, and what's that path?
Sure. I think you also said something interesting too, which I think a lot, is that men are praised for being powerful and strong and having a clear definition of what they want. Women have to be nice. Oftentimes they're judged of whether they're pleasant to be around, and if they're aggressive, they're a bitch.
Yeah, of course. And finesse, right? Yeah, I even find that I'm in a very long relationship, and sometimes I'm like, I don't see Laird finessing me. I see him loving me and looking out for me, and I find myself finessing a lot of things. But then it's interesting, when women hit around 30, so it could be before or after, all of a sudden she starts saying, well, this is how I'm feeling. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, what's wrong with you? You're getting so harsh and all this. And then what I've learned is, if you, by the time you're near 40, if you can master, I'm just dropping off information. Like, this isn't a personal relationship.
Sure.
We're in a business relationship or we're in a sport. This is just information. And then being comfortable with, they may or may not like that. But what is important is that women don't feel like they have to get ramped up and make it personal in order to express just the facts.
Yeah.
And so within that just takes time.
You almost have to kind of think yourself into a male way of thinking in order to be successful in the conversation.
But think about yin and yang, right? I think it's really important, especially this day and age, that we remember to praise male attributes that are important and powerful. And one of them is, hey, it isn't personal. I'm just dropping this off. And I think as a female, I have said, like, I'm going to learn this from these guys because it's so much easier.
It is.
In certain situations. Now, do I do it with my children? Am I doing it in my marriage? Probably not. You'd have to push me pretty far to get kind of that matter of fact. Because the beautiful thing about women, right, is their strength, is their ability to nurture, is love.
Multitasking.
Yeah. And I think it's important not to lose our femininity, even though we hopefully develop this skill of like, hey, it's just how it is. Especially if we're going to be in business or have a conflict with the neighbor. Just be like, yeah, I'm sorry that you're uncomfortable or unhappy.
I agree with you, but I also think it's important too for men to take some things away from women too. It's just that in the business industry, there are not as many women, so we have to kind of cater to them.
Yes.
Whereas there are, as you mentioned, a lot of great characteristics about women that men could probably pick up on too.
Yes, but I also look at business how I look at sport.
Okay.
Where I draw more from my masculine traits in that environment because it's appropriate. However, if you get a group of women together and work, I often find that it's sort of like about the work and getting it done. And sometimes with males, it's sort of like, it was my idea, or that idea goes through because it was my idea. So the best is when you get that constant combination. Also like, hey, it's time to make a decision, where we can sort of maybe go on and on. Should we do it like this, like that? So I think, again, it's always remembering that the combination is the most powerful, and knowing how for everybody to plug in so that we draw from the strengths of both. But in business, again, you know, if I have a child and I'm going to nurse, but my coworker is male, and he's not going to go through that, is it fair? It isn't, but we're in a competitive work environment. And so if the boss goes, well, he's not going to take off 6 months, or he can work 12 hours, it doesn't make it fair, but it's us understanding this is a work environment, right? So it's like always trying to manage, you know, the things that we're dealing with and the things that they are and are not ever going to deal with, ever.